In part 1, you witnessed Mr. Beast embark on a chilling challenge to spend 24 hours in the world's most haunted jail, a place with a dark and bloody history. Since its opening in 1930, over 1,000 souls met their tragic ends within those walls, with 300 dying in a horrific fire. The whispers of the past lingered in the air, and many believed that the spirits of those lost still roamed the prison, searching for peace. Upon arrival, Mr. Beast and his friends encountered a shadow that seemed to slither between the cells, and they began to hear strange, disembodied noises echoing through the eerie silence. Back at their base camp, situated in the cavernous hall of the jail, Mr. Beast and his friends eagerly shared their experiences, each recounting the unnerving sensations they felt and the uncanny occurrences they had witnessed. As they exchanged stories, it became clear that they were not alone in this haunted place. The signals they had received were too strong to dismiss, and the palpable energy in the air hung heavy with the weight of the unknown. Fueled by adrenaline and the thrill of the paranormal, Mr. Beast proposed a new game to heighten their exploration. "Let's play hide and seek," he declared, a mischievous glint in his eye. "If you find me, I'll give you 10,000. His friends agreed enthusiastically, their spirits lifted by the prospect of a fun distraction from the eerie atmosphere. Mr. Beast took off, hiding in one of the rooms that felt less foreboding, but his friends quickly located him, laughter filling the air, a brief reprieve from their fears. Determined to up the stakes, he decided to hide in the notorious solitary confinement cell, the dungeon reputed to be the scariest spot in the entire prison. The very thought sent shivers down his spine, but the thrill of the challenge urged him forward. He set up his camera, ready to document every moment of his isolation. Once inside the cold, dark confines of the solitary cell, Mr. Beast felt the atmosphere shift. The room was sparsely furnished with only an old iron bed and a filthy toilet, but it was the silence that truly unnerved him. It was a silence that felt alive, as if the walls themselves were listening, waiting. As he began to record, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, the air thick with an energy that sent chills racing down his back. Just as he finished his video, an unsettling sensation washed over him. The temperature in the room plummeted, and he felt a cold breeze brushing against his skin, despite the absence of any open windows. The faint sound of scratching echoed in the background, twisting his stomach into knots. "Is anyone there?" he whispered hesitantly, his voice barely above a murmur. The silence responded, stretching endlessly, suffocating him with its weight. Suddenly, a shadow flickered across the corner of his eye. Mr. Beast turned his head quickly, heart racing, but nothing was there, only the chilling emptiness of the cell. He couldn't shake the feeling of dread creeping into his mind, whispering that he was not alone. Gathering his courage, he leaned closer to the camera, forcing a smile despite the rising panic. "All right, guys, I'm in solitary confinement, and it's really creepy in here," he stammered, trying to inject some humor into the situation. But the laughter that usually accompanied his videos felt distant, overshadowed by the oppressive atmosphere. As he continued recording, the sensation of being watched intensified. He felt a presence behind him, and the air seemed to thicken, pressing against him like a heavy shroud. Suddenly, the door to the cell creaked open slowly, an eerie sound that reverberated through the stillness and made his heart leap into his throat. "Guys," he called out, his voice wavering. But there was no response, only the echo of his own words bouncing off the cold stone walls. The door swung wider, revealing the pitch-black corridor beyond, and in that moment, Mr. Beast realized that the true horror of the prison was just beginning to unveil itself. What would happen next? Would he confront whatever darkness lurked in the shadows, or would it consume him entirely? The chilling mystery awaited, and the haunted night was far from over. As Mr. Beast sat in the chilling solitude of the confinement cell, an overwhelming wave of sadness washed over him, sinking deep into his bones. The atmosphere thickened, and suddenly a repugnant odor permeated the air, reminiscent of decay, as if something foul had taken root in the very walls surrounding him. Lost in contemplation about the tragic history of this forsaken place, he was jolted from his thoughts by an unsettling sound. "Please save me, Jimmy," a voice called softly from the doorway. His heart leapt at the sound, thinking his friends had finally found him. Eager to scare them, he shifted to a corner of the cell, preparing for their playful reunion. But then the voice came again, this time much closer, right next to his ear, filled with desperation. "Please save me, Jimmy, help me." Mr. Beast's blood ran cold. He turned his head sharply, disbelief gripping him. The realization that the voice was not coming from any of his friends began to sink in. He felt a chill creeping up his spine, an uncanny awareness that he was not alone in the dark dungeon. Panic set in as he fumbled for his night vision camera, hoping to capture whatever presence lingered in the shadows. Peering through the lens, he scanned the dimly lit cell, but there was nothing, no one. Yet the voice persisted, echoing around him with a haunting clarity. "Please help me, please." Each plea sent shivers down his spine, as if an invisible force was wrapping around him, tightening its grip in a desperate plea for salvation. Overwhelmed by fear, Mr. Beast felt the walls closing in around him. Just as he was about to bolt from the cell, the familiar voices of Chad and Chris echoed in the distance. They were searching for him. Relief surged through him as they found him, and together, they hurried from the suffocating darkness, the weight of the experience lingering like a ghostly shadow in their minds. Despite the harrowing encounter, Mr. Beast's adventurous spirit wouldn't be quelled. He rallied his friends to play hide-and-seek a few more times, their laughter ringing through the haunted halls as they filmed their antics. The playful banter masked the underlying fear that gripped each of them. Yet every chuckle felt like a fragile shield against the darkness that loomed around them. But as the night deepened, it was time for the final and most terrifying challenge: to enter the solitary cell of James Lockhart, a notorious figure in the prison's dark history. Before we delve deeper into this chilling chapter, let me take a moment to introduce you to Fusionfly. If you're planning your next adventure, stop chasing after countless travel websites and agents. Instead, head over to fanfight.com for comprehensive assistance with your travel needs. James Lockhart was only 22 years old when he was confined to cell number 13 in this Ohio prison, sentenced to 15 years for murder. His story was shrouded in horror and intrigue. Rumors swirled about the grim incidents that occurred during his time within those walls, tales of violence and despair that echoed through the corridors long after he was gone. As Mr. Beast and his friends prepared to confront the darkness of cell number 13, the air grew heavy with anticipation. They could feel the weight of history pressing down upon them, and with each step toward that ominous door, they sensed the shadows stirring, ready to reveal the secrets that lay hidden within. What awaited them inside James Lockhart's solitary cell would be a test of their courage, and perhaps a confrontation with the very essence of fear itself. James Lockhart was a name steeped in tragedy and despair. Innocent yet imprisoned, he found himself trapped in a place that felt like a living nightmare. One fateful day, consumed by hopelessness, he took paint thinner from the prison's furniture store, pouring it over himself in a final act of defiance, before igniting the flames that would consume him. It was a desperate end, but it was said that his soul had not found peace. Instead, it remained trapped within the confines of that very cell, eternally bound to the horrors of his last moments. As Mr. Beast and his friends approached James's cell, an unexpected commotion erupted outside. Pigeons and other birds flocked to the prison, their frantic wings beating wildly against the barred windows, as if sensing the tension in the air. The group exchanged puzzled glances but brushed off the disturbance, focusing instead on their mission. They carefully placed an EMF meter and sound recorder atop a cold metal slab, hoping to establish communication with the tormented spirit of James Lockhart. "Is anyone there?" Mr. Beast called into the darkness, his voice echoing against the stone walls. They asked several questions, their anticipation palpable. Suddenly, the EMF meter began to blink fiercely, each flash sending a jolt of adrenaline through their veins. Fearful yet intrigued, they decided to end the session for safety and step back from the cell. Connor chimed in, pointing out that the metal surrounding them could generate EMF signals on its own. But just as he spoke, the EMF meter began beeping again, louder and more insistent. At that moment, Connor's demeanor shifted. A shiver coursed through him, and he gasped as an unnatural chill enveloped his body, making it difficult for him to breathe. Alarmed, his friends helped him sit down, concern etched on their faces. "What's happening?" Tariq asked, his voice laced with worry. "Is James here with us?" they asked, hoping to calm the situation. But when they inquired if Connor was the reason for the disturbance, the EMF meter blinked violently, sending a wave of panic through the group. Connor's eyes widened, burning with an otherworldly light, and he felt a bone-deep cold that seemed to claw at his very essence. In a sudden rush, they cut the camera, desperate to escape the growing horror. Connor began to shake uncontrollably, and then he saw it, the dark shadow from earlier. This time it was clear and horrifying, taking on the form of a burned man with hollow black eyes and an exposed skull, a visage that echoed the torment of James Lockhart. It approached Connor slowly, its presence overwhelming, and he writhed in abject fear, paralyzed by the sight of the grotesque figure. Witnessing their friend's terror, Mr. Beast made the difficult decision to abandon their plans to explore further. "We're staying in the hall for the rest of the night," he declared, urgency in his voice. With dawn only hours away, they gathered their sleeping bags and formed a tight circle, seeking comfort in each other's presence as they tried to find some semblance of peace. While Connor remained visibly shaken, Mr. Beast wrestled with the memories of his own unsettling experiences in the solitary confinement cell and the hospital hall. They both took painkillers, hoping to dull the fear that gripped them and coax their minds into sleep. As they settled into their makeshift camp, Tariq prepared to capture a shot of the group asleep, the camera poised and ready. But just as he pressed the button, a chilling sound echoed through the hall, a low, mournful wail that sent shockwaves through the air, freezing everyone in place. The night was far from over, and the prison had more in store for them than they could ever imagine. The spirits were restless and the darkness was alive, eager to unveil its secrets as the clock ticked closer to midnight. What awaited them in the shadows of the Ohio State Penitentiary was a confrontation with fear itself, and the line between the living and the dead was about to blur beyond recognition. As the night wore on, an unsettling stillness enveloped the hall where Mr. Beast and his friends huddled together, seeking solace from the horrors they had encountered. But just when they thought they could find a moment of peace, the dead walkie-talkie sprang to life, buzzing ominously as if possessing a will of its own. "I am James, please get me out of here, help." The voice crackled through the static, filled with a desperation that sent chills racing up their spines. The words hung in the air, heavy with anguish, before the walkie-talkie abruptly switched off, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Tariq sat upright, eyes wide with fear. The terror of the previous night surged back, and sleep eluded him entirely. He could feel the cold fingers of dread creeping around him, tightening their grip with each passing moment. The others, too, felt the weight of the atmosphere, hearts pounding in unison, as the shadows seemed to pulse with a life of their own. When morning finally broke, they gathered their belongings. Still shaken from the night's harrowing events, Mr. Beast meticulously reviewed the footage they had captured, including the moments that made their skin crawl and the inexplicable occurrences that left them questioning their sanity. Some evidence made it into the final video, but there were countless things he couldn't record, moments that slipped through his fingers, leaving him uncertain if they were real or mere figments of an overactive imagination. As they headed home, a mix of exhilaration and unease filled the air. They had faced something unfathomable, and the questions lingered. Was it all real? Was the Ohio State Penitentiary truly haunted by the restless souls of those who had suffered there? Would they ever dare to take on such a horror challenge again? What do you think? Was every chilling moment genuine or simply a trick of the mind? Is there a shadowy presence lurking in the depths of that prison, waiting for the next group of adventurers to awaken its dark past? We want to hear your thoughts in the comments below.